All right, English 12 for Tuesday, April 14th. We are continuing with the novel, Their Eyes Were Watching God. Your previous assignment was to read chapters 1 and 2. And again, you can find that text, the whole thing, on Google Classroom in the stream. So I'm just going to go over some things that we find out in chapter 1 and 2, and then give you a heads up on what to look for in the next reading. So again, I told you last week that this is what's called a frame story. So the first chapter and the last chapter are set in the present. So Janie, if you've read, you know that she comes back to her, not her hometown, but where she left off in the novel. At this point, she's 40 years old or older. She still seems to be kind of young looking. Based on how people talk about her, and that's kind of what the town does, is they sit and talk smack behind her back, or they speculate about what's happened to her at this point. And her best friend Phoebe comes over and feeds her a meal, and this is where Janie starts to tell her story. Okay, so what we find out in chapter 2 is that unfortunately Janie never really had a mother or a father. We find out that her mom ran off on her as a young lady, and pretty much the grandma has worked to raise her. The grandma also worked to raise a bunch of white kids in their neighborhood, and that's where they lived. Janie and her grandma lived kind of in the backyard in a small house on a white person's property. And the grandma made her money by being a nanny toward not only Janie, but also the kids. And they seem to have a pretty good relationship with the white person that they live with. So our story kind of hops from Janie being a young girl and realizing she's black for the first time. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. Well, I guess I can talk about it now. It looks as if we find out some information that Janie's grandma was probably raped by her slave owner, because Janie's grandma grew up during the time of slavery. And then unfortunately we find out that Janie's mom was also probably assaulted by a local black school teacher. So that makes Janie kind of a mixture of a lot of things. So she's not completely white, she's not completely black. But we pick up in the chapter. She's 16. She's developing, like I said, like the blossom on a pear tree, and she's starting to get interested in boys and or men. Okay, so obviously Grandma picks up on this and wants to do the best she can to give Janie a better life than what she had. So what she does is she sets up a marriage between Janie and this older gentleman. Janie's 16. Logan Killix is probably, 35, 40, maybe older than that. But he's got a house, he has land, he makes money. It seems like a good spot. So that's what I asked you last time. Did Janie's grandma have her best interest in mind? And many of you could say yes, and also at the same time we could say no, because obviously Janie doesn't have a lot of say in what happens to her. Okay, I think Janie's grandma is doing the best she can, and obviously compared to where she came from, this would look better in some way, shape, or form. But really, what we need to keep in mind as we keep reading, Janie's going to be with 3 different men. Okay, so this is the first one. And Logan Killix essentially is a symbolism for slavery and or like sharecropping times. So right after the Civil War, right, black people were free. They were able to own land and work a little bit of it and kind of eke out an existence. And he seems to be doing a pretty good job of that. Then also, in the next reading, you're going to meet Joe Starks, a.k.a. Jody. Okay, so he's going to represent kind of the what's called Reconstruction. So that time after the Civil War where we had to kind of rebuild everything because we tore everything down and burned everything down through war. And then the last guy that she's going to be with is Tea Cake, who is mentioned I think in this first chapter. And he's going to kind of represent the future. Okay, so we'll get to that more when we meet those people. All right. So A couple other things that we find out, like I said, Janie's mom runs off, kind of like her grandma did with Janie's mom, and they were at the end of the Civil War there, and we end up where we are now in the novel. So again, Janie's been raised exclusively by her grandma and pretty much has no connection with her biological mother and father. Okay. So our focus for this reading, the chapters are really short. You just got to read chapters 3 and 4. I'm going to try to keep it to 2 a day. Okay. So in chapter 3, I need you to look for this quote that talks about Logan Killick's being a good husband. So even though he might kind of represent the old ways, staying in your place, just being happy with what you got, we do find out that he is a pretty decent man, at least in the first part of the reading. Okay. Then in chapter 4, based on the information that we find out there, I want you to kind of predict Janie's future. Okay, if she were to stay with him, because she's presented with an opportunity and she's still kind of struggling with that. And that'll take us to our third prompt. Okay, so security versus opportunity. All right, it's kind of similar if you think back to when we did 1984. I think I talked about security versus privacy, and here we are now dealing with those sort of things. Okay, so the only thing you really need to worry about is the text itself. Okay, and again, it's on Google Classroom, and the assignment is to read chapters 3 and 4. Okay, for this assignment, and just respond to these 3 prompts. So hopefully you can just tack them on to what you did last Thursday. Okay. So, 2 or 3 sentences per is fine. Okay, if you do less, you'll get less points. So, just follow the prompts and respond accordingly. Okay, so your prompts for this assignment, according to Janie, how is Logan Killick's a good husband? So all I need you to do is just find that quote. Okay, somewhere in chapter 3, there's a sentence or 2 where she describes how he treats her. Okay, that's all I need you to do. Okay. Then after you get done reading chapter 4, I want you to kind of predict, based on what we find out, Logan Killick does some things. Okay. Predict what Janie's life would probably be like for the rest of her life if she stays with him. Okay. So again, you're just kind of speculating. There is no right or wrong answer, but obviously based on the information, you should be able to come up with a pretty decent idea of what her life would look like. Okay. And then your last prompt, okay, really doesn't have anything to do with Janie. Okay, so this is just your opinion. All right, just your opinion. Why would a person stay where they're at in life, as opposed to taking an opportunity when it presents itself? Okay, and we're going to see this, like I said, in chapters 3 and 4 and going forward here. So really, it's just, tell me what you think about that. Okay, so again, 2 or 3 sentences is more than enough. All right, so try to get in any late work. I'm going to start putting in zeros, not every day, but probably every other day. If something's 2 days late or so, I'm probably going to go back in and put zeros, because it took me an hour the other day to put in all the zeros. So get that stuff turned in. Look at where your grade's at now. Okay, and if you got any questions or concerns, or you think you turned something in, email me, resend it, etc. Okay, the zeros are not permanent. All right, so do the best you can, and I'll see you tomorrow.